Good evening. You're listening to the late edition of the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, broadcasting from the Pine Hills Palace just west of Orlando, Florida, in the Xtreme Movie Studios here. I've got Max and Daisy, my German, Czechoslovakian, short-haired Reds, patrolling the grounds, keeping us safe so we can broadcast to you from places unknown. But just west of Orlando, Florida, I have with me the young 20-something Professor Pixels, also from the same area. And tonight, guys, we're going to be talking about Sylvester Stallone. Happy 77th belated birthday a few days ago. We want to just talk about a few movies of his because he's such a phenomenal actor, director, writer. He's got the triple threat combination, everything going on for him too. And as he's creeping up their age, just wanted to take a moment to kind of go, this is a guy that if we don't talk about him now, wait till he passes away and we do a retrospective, it's going to be way too late. Here on the Xtreme Movie Show, Pixel, you have not been a part of some of the stuff that RDV and from the Great Midwest and I have talked about usually on Tuesday nights as an 80s based channel. We've covered, of course, First Blood, Cobra, some of the Rocky films. I mean, just so much out there that there's something for everybody. And if you like a character, Stallone probably has it. And if you think Stallone Stucks as an actor, well, who gives a rat's ass how good of an actor you are? Because if you don't like watching somebody, what the hell point is it, right? So you're the young 20-something guy. Let me hear your initial take on the first thoughts that come to mind of the actor Sylvester Stallone.
I mean, the first thing that anybody, even at my age and younger, they should recognize the name from Rocky alone. I mean, that is truly one of the greatest films ever. Like that feels like an exaggeration, but it's not. Just in comparison to others, like in other dramas, Rocky is able to use a sport and transcend it. Then you have him as an action star. Who doesn't love Rambo? And then what's Demolition Man, which is more of a comedy. I always think of Demolition Man when I think of it. I wonder if you ever learned how to use the 3 seashells.
Well, I'll tell you, Stallone's one of those guys that does a lot of the stunts on his own. And one thing we always talk about here on Xtreme Movie Show, when we talk about like 80s based movies and branching off in all the other areas, is how since then, we use Commando as an example of the tide turning in films going from, people beating each other up to explosions. And then, of course, the prevalence of CGI. And, last week we reviewed, of course, Dial of Destiny, which I think is a horrible film. And we had some split reviews here on the channel for it. But even just by watching it, you can just tell how bad the CGI is. And you get someone like Stallone, who's not the biggest guy in his world, but he takes working out very seriously, stuntmen, all that kind of stuff. I'm telling you, he tried doing some comedy, he did some stuff in the 80s that were a little hit and miss, but he always would seemed to be able to just create a character that even if you didn't think his acting was good or he mumbled when he talked or all the negatives that all the professional people like to say about him, you still find yourself getting in the middle of it, even if it's friggin' arm wrestling, over the top that we talk about, which for all intents and purposes is still an 80s movie. And regardless of how unique that is, that's something that really hadn't been done too much before. And so you go from, like I say, Rocky to, I mean, how do you top Rocky? And it's like Orson Welles syndrome. You create one of the best things ever your first or second time out. How do you top it? Well, you just have to do different things. And Rambo today, most people just think is great, not just the franchise, but the first film. And I don't know. My mind is drifting towards one we have not talked about on here that's been on our short list forever, and that's a movie that I don't know if you've seen, and I want to hear if you have or you haven't. And that's called Cliffhanger. No. Cliffhanger was such a big action-packed film in the early '90s, where Michael Rooker's in it too. Everybody, where he goes to rescue somebody at the beginning, and the person dies, and so there's this guilt thing coming up. But of course, he's got to help save the people that he's loves and he's a part of from the bad guys by rock climbing out in the middle of the fucking snow and all that. And it was one of those things that in the 90s that went, well, shit, action films are really dying, but here's still a kick-ass one. And then he did Daylight and a few others too. So he just, it was so popular. Matter of fact, you've of course seen Ace Ventura, right? First and second one.
No.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That's right. I know you're young. You weren't even born when those are out, but Jim Carrey parried it in the opening of Ace Ventura 2 with the raccoon. It just, you're young. It'll catch up to you at some point. All right. Let's let's switch gears here a little bit. Let's get a little bit more serious. Even though RDV from the Great Midwest and I covered every episode of Tulsa King, you and I typically cover a lot of TV shows and everything else there. Out of the Stallone TV/movie bit out there, there's got to be some movies that you thought, well, I guess that's a Stallone film. Maybe I should see that one day. What would be on your Stallone short list?
Well, actually, I need to watch The Expendables. I haven't watched any of those.
Yeah.
I need to watch that. I need to watch more of the Rambos because I've seen the first one, but I haven't dived into the sequels at all. But yeah, no, that's what comes straight to mind of what I need to see. Samaritan's not on that list. I've already seen that, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's there was talk a while ago of making maybe a possible short TV series out of this one character. I think it's from '86 called Cobra, and so Stallone's in it, and there's just some great lines in there, like the bad guy in the grocery store is like, "I'm gonna shoot the place up." It's like, "Go ahead, it's not my store. Crime is a disease. I'm the cure." And it's the classic. By that point, really, and it's hard to really say this, but when you say it a lot, it makes sense. For a good 20 plus years in some movies, particularly the Death Wish movies that everybody kind of shit on. When I say everybody, I mean the people that are supposedly considered high level reviewers of it in the press and all that stuff. They hated the idea of vigilantes. Even the fact that you talk about Death Wish for Charles Bronson, of course, his character Charles Bronson was basically your old school classic liberal, as they say, not to get political, but the point is he finds a gun and ends up, taking vengeance in his own hands. And that was a common theme with the 70s after the decay of the 60s in American culture, so much so that you can look at Dirty Harry and go, yeah, I totally understand what he's saying, but Harry's a bit more militant. And then you get somebody like Cobra here with Stallone, and he's an individual. It just works in the 80s because he's got like a cool car. He walks into his beachfront condo in Malibu, where the hell it's at, and he takes the pizza and slices it up with scissors and all that. And it's stupid little things like that Stallone's able to kind of put into kind of characterize something because you're rooting for him. You don't care who the bad guy is, what the plot is, or what gang you don't care. You just want to watch this guy. Stallone's always had a very good knack of that. And you had mentioned not seeing all the Rambos. You'll see how they'll change over time, especially the last two, because I will tell you, the second to last one that got done, I think in 2006 or 2008, I still would put that on my short list, and I'm being serious when I say this, as with one of the most violent, disgusting movies I've ever seen. He knew that he wanted to get that captured digitally, like the way things can be done now. And boy, when 50 cal goes off and tears up a lot of bodies, it's horrific. Everybody wants to talk about Saving Private Ryan in the opening Gambit scene. Well, that was intense, but it's kind of sanitized, I think, by just viciousness standards too. Not to get too dark or whatever, but Stallone's always been pretty good at that. What are some other thoughts you have about Stallone?
One of the fun, a memory that's been in your mind that was locked away and you don't think about it for years and years, and then suddenly childhood core memory is unlocked. You know the kids spy series, Spy Kids?
Right.
He was in Spy Kids 3 and he plays the villain. And
right.
Yeah. And he plays not just himself, the toy maker. He plays multiple versions of himself, giving himself advice. It is that so stupid, but that just shows how great that Sylvester Stallone really is. A movie like Spy Kids 3, 3D, that you don't even really want to think about. He is something that stands out in there that you get a chuckle out of. And he is always great at playing that. I'm upset that I wasn't a part of the Tulsa King reviews a little bit, because that show was fantastic. I understand time-wise that wasn't possible, but getting to see him in that, especially after Samaritan, just reminded me how great he is as an actor. Like, he's just, it feels almost off the cuff. how he's quipping throughout it about, well, the kids these days. You should
Yeah,
some.
and it's interesting you mentioned Spy Kids because Stallone to me, I never saw it, and that's the one I think that has Ricardo Montalban in it, who people remember from Fantasy Island. And Ricardo's a dashing, I think he's Mexican American. Of course, he's the lead in Fantasy Island. He did some other stuff.
Yeah.
Is very macho type physique. Everyone always thought he had pec implants or prosthetics when he was in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, when he played Khan, the bad guy. And he wasn't, but he's just fitting in shape. And one of the things about Stallone that I've always liked is he would always try to figure out how a character would work and not try to understand it and write it in there. And so, Rocky being his pet project, it's a great story to hear him talk about with characters. He took weightlifting and all that very seriously, so much so that when you go to watch the Rocky movies, I believe it's Rocky 4, there's a scene where he's going over to Russia, right, to train, and so he's doing these not pull-ups, but he's doing his elevated sit-ups, I guess if you want to call them, up in the hayloft, and he's just shredded. And I heard he was about 160 pounds in that, when he might have been 210 at one point, bulking. But a very strong guy. He tore his pec with Franco Columbu, who was the training partner Schwarzenegger back in the golden years of bodybuilding, late 70s to early 80s. So, I mean, the guy's trained with the best. He's an animal. He busts his ass, so much so that, to your point with the Expendables, as much as they're about 15 years old now or so, the people that he's got in there were old, legit action stars. It reminds you of an 80s type film, and it shows you that you don't need to, even in today's terms, have a big budget. You get a bunch of people over there, simple enough plot, and a bunch of explosions and violence, and people will watch it. It's he knows how to turn it up. He definitely does.
Mhm.
And it's funny that you say that too, because Samaritan, okay, it's a graphic novel, right? I mean, you guys over on the Geeky Puppet Show cover a lot of different things there too. And that's a movie we covered here that was, I guess it was supposed to be R-rated, and he was the bad guy, and it's the switch, whatever. He can adapt himself, even with what limitations people may say he has, to something like that, or even Spy Kids. And so, like Ed Brewer saying in chat as well, the dude's just been around forever. He can pick and choose what he wants to do. So I think it's awesome when you have that, where you don't need to have to rely on studio money or anything else, and you have your touch on it. And so Tom Cruise to me is starting to catch up to him, because Tom Cruise has been around for a long time, not quite as long, but he has that touch where he can do what he wants. And I would argue that having people like that have been around, especially with the younger crowd, meaning your generation and all the current films that are out there, it's going to be a much harder situation to find people in, because what person do you know that's been around a really long time that kind of does their own thing? It's very rare. I just mentioned Tom Cruise and Stallone. It's tough as actors get older to still have that passion, and he definitely has it. So that's pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. You seen Saw Spy Kids? And I never did. I was like, one of these days I got to see that too. Um,
Well,
talk to me
I
about.
mean,
Go ahead.
you're not going to like it, but you'll. I think you could get the charm of Stallone being goofy for about, well, for how long is it? Like an hour and a half. So for about 30 minutes.
But they're kids' movies, right?
Yeah, they were on Disney Channel. I mean, they wouldn't. Yeah, no, they were on Disney Channel. So they are kids movies, but they're fun. They're fun. It's not quite as stupid as kids movies today, but it's still a kids movie.
Yeah, now one person that has been around a very long time, and we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about him in the Extreme Movie Show, that would be Michael Caine, or Sir Michael Caine if he's knighted. I don't recall if he is. Guy's been around forever, and he was kind of known as a tough guy. And in the 80s, he softened up a little bit and was in like Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, a phenomenal movie with Steve Martin. It's just a really fun, cute movie. He had a movie where he played a tough guy, and it really stunned a lot of people, I think, over here in America, because of how gritty and gutty it was. I think it was filmed in Liverpool. It's called Get Carter. And of course, the English mob's a little bit different than the American mob, which we sometimes think only came from Sicily or Italy, and maybe Vegas or whatever, Crips and Bloods, and that's about it. But the movie Get Carter and some of those films in the 60s that showed the blight and everything post-war in England or London or wherever wasn't very nice and brutal, and that people just barely got by. Stone tried to recapture that in his own way around the year 2000, and this is when he started actually kind of not being well received by anybody at this point, so he had to have a second or even third career, if you want to call it that, because he remade the movie Get Carter. And I will say this: I totally will admit that I can understand how people don't like the editing, how it looks too much like a music video, how you can hardly understand them, how it's a remake, how even though Michael Caine is in it as a side character, because Michael Caine's been doing that for 25 years now for the most part, there's still something about Get Carter. I am the only person on this planet that actually loves it and is entertained by it. It's my moonraker of the Stallone catalog. I don't know how to explain it. The opening scene is great. I love the way he delivers his lines. It is something that I think you would probably find horrible. I mean, it's just, I don't know. Mickey Rourke's in it. It's pretty brutal when you start to understand what's going on, but half the time you can't really pay attention and go, "What the fuck is going on here?" But I love it. It's an insane mess, and it's probably one that shouldn't have been made, but damn it, I love it. And I just he had a vision for it, and it works for me. I don't know what else to say. That's probably not even one you've heard of, is it?
No, no,
Oh man,
no.
it bombed big time. So much so that he took a lot of time off actually, and movies changed a lot in the late '90s even. So when he actually came out with Rocky and then Rambo around 2006, 2008, people went, "Wait a minute, these are fucking good." And a lot of people were like, "Oh, come on, Stallone's he's too old. He's past his prime. He's just cashing in on old stuff that he did. He doesn't have an original thought." And Stallone's idea always was, well, it's my character. I can do with it what I want. And if I make the character relevant in today's terms, that's what's important. And I'm bringing that up because you and I have talked a lot about in our reviews of, like, say, Dark Shadows, for example, the revival in 1991. A Dan Curtis production, by the way, in case you people did not know that, not Quinn Martin. Um, we talked about how since Dan Curtis was involved in the revival, that it captured the spirit of the original, including the theme, right? And you, being the only person that's seen all 1,147 episodes, can attest to that and give us your blessing on it. Well, Stallone took Rocky, made him older, made him relevant to today's world in a way that works. So
Yeah.
maybe you're like, okay, he's going to box. Well, how can he box? He's old. What's going to happen? And then I'm still telling you, even though the internet was ramping up, high speed and all that at this time in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, there's still that meme out there, that video clip, if you go to it, where he goes in there with his old trainer and he's like, "Rocky, you got arthritis in your knees, so we can't run. You've got blah 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 on your neck, so we can't do this. So we're just going to have to resort to blunt force trauma, or we're gonna have to build these hurting bombs." And it's like a stupid little 2 minute montage of him lifting heavy weight and being old and pounding it. And you're like, "Fuck yeah, it works." And you know what the formula is, but it's like it doesn't mean that the snack tastes any less good, damn it, just because there's sugar and some chocolate. I mean, so that's probably one that if you build up to and watch the Rockies in order, which we've talked about doing and reviewing here on the Extreme Movie Show, I think when you're at that point, you're like, "Oh, I see, it makes sense." Because for someone like RDV on Tuesday nights with us here on the Extreme Movie Show, when we talk about stuff, we try to put that historical perspective on how it's related to other films we've talked about, and his viewpoints and everything else there too. So my complaint about modern movies today is not just the CGI, it's the fact that they don't make it relevant to today's term, just like they totally screwed Indiana Jones, in my opinion. Speaking of Indiana Jones, you weren't able to join us with our schedules conflicting last week about it. Did you want to take this time to talk a little bit about Indiana Jones and how you think it was as far as a movie?
I haven't seen it. I haven't been to the movies in like 3 weeks. So
Oh, there you go. I will tell you, you're not missing out, but see it soon before it's taken out because it's already bombed at the theaters. But it'd be
yeah,
interesting to get your take because Harrison Ford is somebody everybody loves, right?
I love Harrison Ford.
And you would see anything with
No, he
Harrison
doesn't
Ford
love
in it,
me.
right?
What?
You would see anything with Harrison Ford in it, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Even the crappy Call of the Wild movie that he made.
He's another one that's an example of what we just talked about with Stallone. So, keep that in mind. It's going to be pretty interesting what happens here. He's one of the last few guys, Stallone and Harrison Ford, that can kind of pick and choose what they do. All right, so let's just back up a little bit and talk a little bit about some stuff from the 80s, because as an 80s based channel, I like to say, and you not being born until much later after that, what is it about the 80s you don't get, don't understand, or you're curious about, topically speaking, that I can give you the Stallone perspective looking through his eyes?
I mean, I get a lot of what he was going for, especially at that time.
Hmm.
It, like the 80s, pretty much everything Rocky was 80s. Like at the very end of the 70s is when he did Rocky 2, and then Rocky 3 came out, and that is the epitome, the best of the 80s movies at that point. Rocky 3 has everything. What was the film that we talked about before with Arnold Arnie, Schwarzenegger? Just a couple weeks
Commando,
ago. Commando.
Father's Day.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
I
canon on Father's Day on the
I
Extreme Movie Show.
I said that was the most the most 80s movie there ever was. But I think that Rocky 3 is that, but I enjoy it. Um, but with that, with Rocky 4, and I see exactly where it was going. At least from the perspective of Mr. Balboa. The problem is when you get to the 90s, but that's another that's another topic.
Yeah, it's amazing because some people work well with others, some people don't. I think Stallone's somebody that, people forget that, okay, yeah, he was in Spy Kids, but before that, he was in Ants, right? He
Nobody
did he
wants to
did,
talk
uh,
about
did some voiceover
ants.
work for that. He was Judge Dredd, even though Carl Urban, I guess, whoever it was, did this other one more recently. He moved to Miami in the early 90s because Miami became a thing or whatever. So he puts Miami on display in 1994 with a specialist. It's kind of a chilling kind of movie or whatever like that. Like it's like you get a Miami type vibe for it. That's hard to explain. I mentioned how Michael Mann does that really well, and of course is one of his greatest movies, Thief. How you get that vibe. You kind of get a little bit of vibe with the specialist, which of course has a Antonio Banderas in it as the bad guy, which is good. Lockup is tremendous. We haven't talked about. Then of course we talk about Tango and Cash is probably to me very underrated as well. That's where he teams up with Kurt Russell, and the bad guy is Believe It or not. Jack Palance, who I told you had, when we talked about the Joe Piscopo movie last week with Treat Williams, when we did a retrospective of him, the dead whatever it was, where they're dead police officers. Jack Palance, there's all this confluence of events where, like, Stallone seemed to have his pulse on what was going on at the time, where he could make what he created relevant. And that's a very rare skill. And I think that's one of his best ones. Because again, in addition to directing and writing, he created this stuff. He's acted. So you could say he's a triple threat. You could say he's a
Yeah.
quadruple threat. He's just that good. I think he's definitely one of the people I would put on the pedestal on the short Extreme Movie Show list here of icons, because again, he's had a lot of movies. He's done a lot of things. A lot of them are very good. He's got a lot of variety to it. Um, Man, it makes me want to review something specific. But anyway, I wanted to talk about one movie that you may or may not have seen. I'm going to ask you here because we've never talked about this. And as always, we never prep for the Extreme Movie Show. We talk cold. In the late 90s, everyone was impressed by Stallone and thought he should win an Oscar or something for a movie where he gained a bunch of weight eating pancakes. And he played kind of a sort of cop in the movie. It was called Copland. Have you seen this movie?
No, I have not.
Okay, that's the movie everybody says, "Hey, yeah, everybody loves Rocky, but no, you need to see Copland. It's that different." The issue with this movie that I think is kind of interesting is because there's some other films that people think are really good, like 310 to Yuma, Wolverine, right, from 2013, Logan, okay, Indiana Jones from this year. The reason why is this is the second film that was written and directed by none other than, wait for it, James Mangold, which I'm shocked because how do you go from Copland to Indiana Jones? I
I don't
don't
know.
get
I
it.
haven't seen it.
No, but and I'm bringing this up here because it's a small world in Hollywood, right? So again, Indiana Jones, it's a tentpole franchise. James Mangold's, supposed to be there to kind of do whatever. I don't think it looks that great. Everybody loved Logan. They said, "Hey, this is the type of movie that adults can go see that or y'all's specialty again over on the Geeky Puppet Show, where you talk a lot about comics, but also comic book movies and stuff. We talk about them a little bit here, but an R-rated adult movie, Logan? Are you kidding me? Hell yeah! Walk the Line, the Dewey Cox thing, people like that. I'm surprised because Copland's by many considered to be the, hey, we're going to take Stallone serious now. He finally got it right after 20, 25 years. I don't know, but I think that's one that it's not fun like the 80s Stallone that we've seen, but it's one that if you're going to talk Stallone, you've got to see it at some point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just trying. I'm looking at James Mangold because you brought it up, and yeah, no, he directed the Wolverine too, which was before Logan, which wasn't great, but it wasn't a bad Wolverine movie. So yeah, and I've heard decent things about Ford versus Ferrari. So I don't know. I'm going to have to wait and get my opinion on the Dial of Destiny. As long as it's better than Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, that's that's what I was looking for.
Yeah, that seems to be the one question on everybody's mind is it better than Crystal Skull? And the other question is, hey, I don't understand why people don't like this movie because the last 5-10 minutes is such an emotional thing, and you see where everything turns to. And I completely disagree, because going back to the whole thing, what I've learned from Stallone and other people, if you don't like the character or can empathize or sympathize with them and what they're going through early on, or somebody's completely unlikable, then you don't give a flying fuck about the movie. So you're emotionally not connected and you don't care about the payoff at the end. And yeah, we say, Rocky's a love story. It's not a boxing story. It has boxing in it. But the whole point is him not being a bum. So that way he's got some self-esteem. So then that way he goes and he gets married, and, the whole life thing that goes around it. And it's simple. And some people say it's almost exploitive because it's cheesy, but it works. And that's the thing with a lot of reviewers today, is that they want to go with these high concepts and talk about stuff and say, see, this is great, whatever. And, it just doesn't work. And Stallone still knows how to put it together, whereas Indiana Jones fails. So yeah, it'll be interesting if you catch a couple of those and are able to give your perspective on that too. But let's wrap this up. I'm babbling a lot because he's a big icon of mine. He had a birthday and we didn't get a chance to kind of talk about it earlier in the week, so I thought tonight would be good. What other thoughts do you have about Stallone in closing, or any other final comments?
I am just hoping that we get a season 2 of Tulsa King. According to Wikipedia right now, the show seems to be falling apart. They can't film in Oklahoma now because of the cost reasons. They lost the showrunner and they're looking for a new one. Even after it was confirmed 3 episodes into the first season. So I'm just hoping we get more of that. So Sly still got it, man. Sly's still the Stallone, the Italian stallion.
Yeah, the interesting about Tulsa King season 2 to me is that this is one of the first times really Stallone ventured into like episodic TV, right? And obviously he's a part of it, so he's got a lot of sway. But he said, "Hey man, I didn't realize." He said, "Movies are like, walking apart compared to this TV stuff. This isn't easy." He goes, "Man, it would be really nice if we could move this down to Miami." Kind of half joking because that's where he lives and all that too. And I go, if it's all thrown up like this, I'd love to see him down in Miami, because people like the character, they like the show, they liked how it was set up. You could do it. You might have to have like a transition episode to get you somewhere, kind of like when we did Dark Shadows and they went back in time. I don't know where it was going to go or how it was going to resolve, but that was kind of fun, enjoying the ride with it too. So I hope we get that as well.
Just wait until we watch the original series and you learn the truth of parallel time.
Yeah, that's started. Spoiler alert: Dial of Destiny has time travel.
Yeah, no, I've already heard that.
All right. Yeah. All right, guys, there you have it. Just a little quick topical about Stallone tonight, just covering a few of his movies. Got so many of them, just where he stands in the movie museum, as it were. He's an icon to me. I think what he does isn't going to be replicated. I think there's very few people left like him. We talked about this before, even with the old school type movies that we have reviewed here on Xtreme Movie Show, whether it's Hitchcock films or whoever, the old classic sci-fi versus new, what makes them different. The fact there's no such thing as comedy horror. It's either horrific or it's not, but you can have comedy action. See Treat Williams for that. It's pretty interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with Stallone over the next few years as he closes out too. He's one of the great icons out there in movies. And if you haven't seen stuff, go see Stallone. You'll be entertained. You're going to find something that you like. Ed Brewer and everybody in chat knows that. So for Professor Pixel, for RDV from the Great Midwest, I'd like to thank everybody for taking a moment to just kind of take a few minutes out of their day and listen to something about Stallone, where we can have a little bit of fun, talk about stuff, and looking forward to what we talk about Tuesday night and next Sunday as well here on Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a good night. And as always, stay extreme. Get Carter is my underrated Stallone flick. Ed's asking. I'll just say is Get Carter. It's fucking awesome. Every scene, it's like a collection of scenes. The original theme is fantastic, Ed, but it got a club vibe to it, like that '90s clubs thing to it. It's got some Moby in it if you like that kind of music. It's filmed in Seattle, so it's rainy in Vancouver. But just Stallone going, excuse me, scary man, do I scare you? Who do you think you are? Tiger Woods. All these friggin' lines. Get Carter's phenomenal. I love it. Mickey Rourke in there going, just go watch it, Ed. Tell me what you think. And be lit up for it or not. It's fun. I might even watch it here soon. It's been a while. Get Carter's at least a yearly watch for me. I will say that. Love it, love it, love it. Good night now.
Good night, Mark.